Two Minnesota state lawmakers were shot in their homes overnight. Democratic Minnesota State Rep Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark Hortman were killed in what officials say was a targeted assassination. Another state lawmaker and his spouse were injured in the attack. The suspect escaped after an exchange in gunfire with police. There is an active manhunt for the shooter at this hour. Welcome to Fox News Live on a busy news day. I'm Mike Emanuel in Washington. For a reaction to the deadly shooting in Minnesota, let's bring in former FBI Special Agent Ren McEachern and former federal prosecutor Jonathan Fahey here in our Washington studio. So, Ren, what we're hearing from authorities is the suspect dressed up as law enforcement, had a uniform, had evidently a badge, had even a vehicle that looked like a police vehicle, targeted assassination of elected leaders in Minnesota. What's your reaction to that? Where does your mind go?
Yeah, this is really worst case scenario in my book, because when you think of a police officer in uniform, that's the person you can trust almost every time. And to think that they're using that level of trust to take advantage and really commit this assassination essentially is very complex. And now for the law enforcement involved, not knowing who this person is, this whole area is going to be flooded with law enforcement. They may not know each other, right? They don't know different departments, different federal agents coming in. And there's going to be a big problem with identification, and then there's going to be a bigger problem with the perimeter that has to be set up. There are so many complexities of this crime, but this is horrific, and this is really going to be a trust issue going forward. One of the things that I thought was really important on the press conference where the police chief said is that when someone's approached by a police officer, they'll be in twos. So that's really important that people need to realize this. But it also is about knowing your neighbors, right? Neighbors should be calling each other, right, and saying, hey, is everybody okay? The other part of the story is, where is this guy? Is there a barricaded situation now? That further complicates this, right? And then they have to figure out who they are. So they go to a house-to-house search, and now they know this guy's obviously ready. He's armed and dangerous, clearly. There's so many complications in this case. The other side of this is there's also a lot of evidence in this case, right? It sounds like we have a vehicle, right? I'm sure we have now, looks like some of the survivors could be eyewitnesses to this. You're going to have ballistic evidence. We know there's going to be DNA evidence, fingerprints likely within the vehicle, all the surveillance cameras. But right now it's about flooding all of the resources in. Thankfully, we know that Attorney General Bondi's already chimed in and said they're on top of this. I know the FBI and Kash Patel's groups are already sending massive resources. We know the administration and President Trump also chimed in. So they're going to get excellent resources. But right now, it's about safety going forward for the community.
So, Ren, it sounds like this guy had a manifesto, that there were a list of people that he was targeting. So, obviously, you'd expect stepped-up security at their homes. And what about the idea of combing a perimeter, a fairly, probably decent-sized perimeter?
It's incredibly problematic. And one of the things, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and with the Boston bombings and the Snarf brothers.
I want to break. Forgive me this. There's a news update. Let's go live to the news conference in Minnesota.
Are all of the people on the list, have they all been notified, and do they have law enforcement presence with them?
Again, that is part of the investigation right now, so I'm not going to answer those.
Can you give us an idea of how many people are on the list?
So, well, I'm sorry, as I mentioned, we're getting to investigatory information. I'll leave that to Superintendent Evans.
Yeah, and good afternoon again, everyone, or good morning. Drew Evans, Superintendent of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension.
Superintendent, can we have it quiet out there so everybody can hear? Thank you.
What I wanted to note, though, is part of this, the references, the individual that is a person of interest that we've talked about, or individuals, are not in custody at this time. And so the reference materials that were inside of the vehicle that we saw, we have no understanding that any of the No Kings events would be targeted, but we also find it of interest to the public that these would be in there, and we want to alert everybody until we do that. Because this is such an active investigation with information not knowing right now, we feel it's an obligation to all of you and the public across the state of Minnesota to alert you of it, and that's why the Colonel made the notation of recommending people don't go today. But the individuals are not in custody yet, and so we want to make sure as that very active manhunt is underway and continues, that we make sure that we're sharing that, and that's part of why we're making the recommendation. As to the investigation and the list, we are working through that now and talking to individuals, and we'll continue to. What I would say with the list is there's a large number of people. That's all I can say about it. We will work through all of that, what the motivations of this are, and we'll provide that as you can. This is really a public safety announcement for everybody so that we can make sure people are informed and make safe decisions throughout the day.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so what,
Specifically about the no kings.
yeah, I heard that too.
Okay.
What was the question?
I was just going to say, we got an email from organizers saying the event's still on, and people are
So
supposed to
we-
be
yeah.
gathering now. So
It's a great question. So we're not the organizers. We're in contact with the organizers, I will say.
yeah.
However, as you heard the message the Colonel gave, we've also put that out on State Patrol social media pages. And then I think with that, you will see that there's also a photo that goes along with that of what we found inside the car regarding the No Kings rally. Social media, State Patrol social media pages, and I believe it's also being shared in the Department of Public Safety social media pages.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. As I've done before,
Got
I
an update
promised-
from Circle Pines, Minnesota. Authorities there giving a brief update for journalists, trying to give them the latest information. Sounds like some evidence may be put out on social media so people are aware of what we're dealing with here. What caught your ear? I heard them mention individuals, plural. What about that?
Yeah, and I heard the same thing. This is a big shift, right? Initially, we heard one shooter on foot. Right now, individuals, often early information is incorrect in these matters. And so you have to now assume there's one to two or multiple shooters. Again, another level of complexity. Are they together? Are they, again, going back to the Sanarif brothers, those guys were together when on the run. And you have to think about, again, it's always a safety issue. How can we take care of that? And that's why they're probably going to have to put some information out. They likely have some understanding of who these people are or persons are. If the vehicle's registered to them, right, they may have some sort of identification there. But they're going to try to get photos. They may have ring photos or surveillance photos, because it's so critical to get a photo out of this person, because the community is in lockdown and safety is paramount. But now 2 or 3 shooters, now just ratcheted up the level of violence that's capable. And remember, these guys are on the run, right? They've already committed an assassination. We know they're clearly armed and willing to kill. And they're likely happy to probably shoot it out with however they get caught. The other problem here, as we were discussing, is the barricaded situation, right? They're going to have to go house to house, not just answer the door. They're going to have to clear each house. Every single inch of that house, of that building, has to be cleared, because someone could answer the door and say, oh, he's not here, but he's behind the door, holding a gun to them, and say, hey, don't tell him I'm here, right? So they have to clear each house. And so this is a very long process. One of the other parts about, I was mentioning going to the Boston bombing example, the Snarf brother that was actually captured, he was outside the perimeter. So I'd also tell people, even though you may be outside the perimeter, everybody should have their head on a swivel. The whole community around it needs to be very careful about watching and seeing things. The community's also got to play a big part in picking up that phone, calling 911 when they see something that doesn't seem right. This is also a part of the community reaching out to 911 to make those calls.
Former federal prosecutor Jonathan Fahey, where does your mind go as you hear these latest facts from authorities there in Minnesota?
Well, it is pretty interesting, because if it really, and I was, wasn't sure that's what he said until he said it twice about individuals. So this really cuts against the earlier advice that people were given to don't respond to police unless it's 2 of them. Well, if there are now 2 shooters, that certainly cuts against that and puts a greater risk to people when they're interacting with police, which certainly in this neighborhood today, people are going to be interacting with police because they're going to be interviewing people, gathering evidence. So this really makes it even more scary. And this whole situation is a horrible situation, because sort of the obvious, you want to be able to trust police, but it does, you have all of these incidents of swatting and all of these things going on now, and it makes those even more dangerous for the people that are the victims of swatting, but also the police that are responding, unknowing that they're being called to something that doesn't exist. And when I was a federal prosecutor, I prosecuted a case, I don't want to say similar because there are a lot of differences, but the perpetrators all dressed as police officers to gain entry into the home and killed 3 individuals. So this isn't an unusual tactic. It is in this case, but in many instances, people will dress up as police maybe to commit robberies and things like that. But it does just, as Ren was saying, just makes it more complex, more dangerous. And we certainly expect these people will be caught. And what's in that manifesto is going to be important as to motivation, but it may not be as important as the immediate need, which is just capturing these people, getting the public safe. But all of these things make it just really puts a whole community on edge, and really the whole country on edge with so much going on. And this thing when they talk about they made reference to the No Kings event. Does this mean that they were going to target this event? Does this mean they were associated with the event in some way? We don't really know, and I guess it doesn't really matter what the motivation is right now. It's just how do we catch these guys and stop the threat?
I want to read to you a tweet from the Minnesota State Patrol. It says, given the targeted shootings of state lawmakers overnight, we are asking the public to not attend today's planned demonstrations across Minnesota out of an abundance of caution. So these are protests by liberals, Democrats, progressives, however you want to label them. And so clearly there may be something in this manifesto that they found that is raising cause for concern. Jonathan?
Well, and I hope people don't attend just for that reason, because we don't need more violence on top of this. And there'll be, many more opportunities to make the same political point that these protesters want to make. But it is interesting what is in there. And the other thing that they did mention that I think that the second person on the press conference talked about they were making appropriate notifications. I assume these were individuals that were maybe listed in the manifesto that may be targeted. So to make sure, not only make sure they're warned, but maybe make sure they're also safe currently, make sure they've been made contact with to make, because they could still be trying to target these individuals, or they could be seeking to flee. We don't really know where their heads are at. And what Ren was saying, if they're willing to do this, maybe they're willing to clearly kill for a cause. They certainly may be willing to die for a cause as well. So these threats on these individuals may not be over right now.
I do think, though, if they're making the specific request not to participate in these protests today, to me, I think there's probably some articulable, evidence that is part of the scheme here. Clearly, there's a lot of preparation went into this, right? A lot of premeditation went into this. They were very organized. They took very detailed steps to do what they're doing. And we don't know if it's just this group, right? This could just be one part of a larger cell that's operating. That's where it really becomes quite concerning. And so for them to say no on going forward with the protest, there has to be, especially in Minnesota, there has to be something, I think, quite serious, and the public really should listen to that, because now it's really getting, the ratcheting up of violence is really getting to a whole new level here.
Gentlemen, thanks for your analysis. Great to have you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.